unfortunately, we said all of that before I clicked the recording. And that's so unfortunate because I have to quickly say it again. My apologies. But this is an EU-funded project, communications, mastering communications for stronger advocates. And as Mr. Wilmoth stated, crafting impactful messages, tools, techniques, and channels for nonprofit campaigns. And we're here now on the third session of the training, and we welcome persons online and persons here at 2D Camp Road, Kingston 4, who will be participating in the session. We thank the EU for funding this very important workshop because, as you know, we have to know how to communicate. Now I'm going to again read Mr. Wilmoth's bio, just in case you may have missed it, coming in late into the room. Kalando Wilmoth has nearly 20 years in the communications profession, with the past decade spent helping businesses and NGOs bring their corporate and social impact goals to life. He's the co-founder and the co-CEO of Shane Co, a digital marketing and social impact communication agency. His curiosity about getting companies to genuinely invest in social issues resulted in his work with Project STAR, Jamaica's largest private sector-led community development initiative. There he helped a key role in launching the country's first social IPO, pulling in over 20 million in media coverage, which helped to raise more than 45 million in corporate donations. As an adjunct lecturer at UWI's Karimak, he's on the ground helping future media pros find their footing in the field. And since 2023, he's been working with CVSS, and we are grateful for that, building members' skills in communication and brand management. So there you have it. You can rest assured you have the best coming into the program this morning to ensure that you have all the skill sets ready to be the best advocates in civil society.
Okay. Me now?
Go right ahead, go right ahead.
All right, well, let's just make sure the folks here are hearing me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I see some familiar faces, which I will probably have to enlist to help me to train this morning so that I can. So if they think I'm going to say anything wrong, then we share in the errors, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the third of. Is it third of 4 or third of 3?
Third of 4.
Third of 4.
There's another one, but that one we're trying to engage persons outside of the corporate.
Right. So there may be another that if you want to take a trip down to wherever we're doing it, you could join. Today we're going to talk about crafting impactful messages, tools, techniques, and channels. Okay, so I remember the thing. Even though you guys were supposed to remind me, but I remember. What I want you to do now is think of a campaign that you would like to do for your own organization. And by the time we get to the end, I would have given you some steps that would allow you to actually figure out a message for your organization, right? So from now, think of something that you want to do, and a campaign you want to run. And we're going to walk through tools, techniques, and channels. And then when we're finished, we're going to do a quick little exercise to see if you can design a campaign message for your campaign. Is that good? All right. So what are we going to cover today? Let's see if this thing is working. How is it working? There you go. Understanding the different types of campaigns. We're going to talk a little bit about selecting storytelling tools. We're going to look at creating messaging strategies. Hopefully your strategy don't cut off like how mine cut off in here. So, and we'll have one practical activity. But we are going to actually try to do a lot of practical stuff in between. Some of it I'll kind of just explain to you, give you some examples. But it's all about helping you to think through your own strategy that we're going to have as an outcome today. All right, first of all, what is a campaign? Who can tell me what a campaign is? Anybody online or in the room? In the room is quiet, so maybe the online folks are a bit more awake and with me this morning. Or are you equally unsure? Anybody?
Oh, somebody wants to answer online.
Achieving a particular objective. Series of coordinated activities in a achieving a particular objective. That sounds like it could be. Anybody else?
Go ahead, Kimberly.
Any other?
Marriott Blake, who wishes to.
Collective, different ways of putting together the message so that it can be very clear to the people that you're trying to appeal to. So it's different, whether it's methodologies, maybe the same general theme in your messaging, but finding different ways to pull the audience in and appealing to them based on what you're trying to get them to do based on the message you're sharing. So if you're sharing X, what do you hope for them to do? You're going to be clear that in your campaign, it includes the what you're sharing and the how you want them to respond.
Okay, all right, thanks, Kimberly. So that has a lot of the elements, so to speak. You were going to say something, Rise Life Management.
I don't know if I was, but.
Oh.
So yes, there have been several pieces, but it is being a sustained message over a period of time, incorporating key emotional elements, data, and so on, that would appeal to your target audience, can get whatever kind of support you're looking for. Be it financial, policy, or whatever to support that ultimate goal you want in life, organization, or that particular project or program.
Cool.
Rachel
Right, so-
Thompson would like to respond.
Okay, go ahead, Thompson.
Rachel?
Right. Good morning, everyone. I typed it in the chat, but targeted actions with the aim of evoking a particular action or response from a particular audience.
Right, okay, cool. So, yes, and yes, go ahead.
Yes, based upon the pretest, a course of action where you have a set goals organized to reach to where you want to go concerning the campaign.
Okay, so campaigns have goals in them. Campaigns have series of actions, as it says. Campaigns, the point you made, remind me of your name? JD. Yeah, you said something about sustained. And that's a little tricky because you can have a long campaign or you can have a short campaign. And the issue with sustaining a campaign is more so sustaining the message, because if you're doing the one thing for too long, people kind of check out or it becomes white noise. Yeah. So if you have a sustained effort, you have to find different ways to create peaks and troughs in the message, right? So you need to do something else to evolve the message or bring somebody in. But I never thought about sustain, but I'm glad you used the term, because especially in this work, you know, the CSO development work, the kind of community, the volunteer sector, whatever we call that third sector. Sometimes you have to, your issues don't run out. It's not like, okay, it's not like trying to sell some water and you say, boy, the sales this month is this, it's water, so who cares, right? You just sell water every month. You're looking at issues pertaining to people's lives, and sometimes they're difficult issues. And the reason you spin up a campaign could be different this year versus next year. And sometimes you may need to sustain an effort beyond. But if that's the thing where you're thinking of carrying on something for a while, you have to think about how you're going to reorganize sometimes. Because I think my definition is, why am I going away? I'm going wrong. A series of coordinated activities aimed at achieving a specific objective. If we put in your definition about sustaining it, you have to think about sometimes how you reorganize, because you always have to refresh to keep people interested. A good way with the sustaining as well is, what did you learn in the first part that you can now use to drive that action again? When you know, so if you have to implement something over a 6-month period, that's a little long. The usual marketing, if we use the commercial marketing techniques, then a 9 weeks campaign is sufficient, and then you have to do something else. But in your work, you may need to sustain a 6-month campaign, and then you deliver that in different ways. And you have to think about you have to phase that out so that your audience doesn't become like, okay, I've got the point now, leave me alone, right? You can imagine if you start a campaign and ask you to donate some money. And month one, you say, oh, yes, and you donate. And then month 5, them still come ask you again and say, wait. It's like you didn't properly think about the thing. It's gonna have an effect on the person psychologically if it's just going on and on and on and on and on, right? Unless you're saying that unless you say, oh wow, we've achieved the goal and now we see that we can tackle something else. That social proof is then gonna make you say, okay, well, when I gave the last time, they did and it worked, so I can give again. So, but you see, you'd have to change, you'd have to show some proof now that the reason for investing paid off.
What I was thinking as well, when I had mentioned sustain was really to get that. You won't always be able to achieve what you want by doing a single. I was thinking more into, especially for NGOs and our budgets, sometimes even if you think you get that one message out, it may not be enough.
Right.
To really get enough persons to come on board with what you want, but I definitely appreciate the changing in the
Yes,
past,
definitely.
the progression.
And the truth is, you will not have any, no, in this day and age, there's a word that's with how distributed media are. So back in the day when everybody knows at 7 o'clock news, and you can just drop all the ads at 7 o'clock, that everybody who's watching TV is gonna, right? Show of hands the last time you watched TV at 7 o'clock. Oh, one person, one. Carrying the side man, right? Most people at 7 o'clock in the evening these days are not watching news. But it doesn't mean you don't get the news, because you can go watch it after One Spot Media, whatever, or they put it on YouTube, or you see a few clips on Instagram the next day. But most people are not necessarily watching, well, most people who used to, because I'm sure the all media survey will suggest that a lot of people still are watching the news at 7, but it would be fewer than who used to, say 10 years ago. Those numbers are very clear. It would also be, there are a number of people who would see news content, but they're not necessarily seeing news content at 7 o'clock like we all used to. You watch it when you want, right? And as a consequence, putting one message out on the news, it's not going to be sufficient. Because first of all, there's a rule of repetition, and there are rules about how many times a message would need to be seen on a particular channel by that audience in order for it to have the effect. And then you have to deal with the fact that your one audience communication habits as far as media usage is so distributed now, so diverse, that sometimes you are watching the TV, but you're also on Instagram in front of you while the TV is going on. And so your attention is divided. And maybe if you even like listening to radio, you're probably only listening to radio when you're in your car, if you don't put on Apple Music or Spotify or whatever other thing, or you're listening to some podcast. And therefore you find that how you reach people now, there's no one channel. One channel isn't going to do it. And then there's going to be this race to always try and find people directly. So you find that you have to choose a channel that gets you immediately connected to your audience.
1 second, Mr. Wilmoth. Online participants, I don't think you're seeing the presentation. Is that correct?
Seeing the presentation, well, I'm seeing what's the campaign, unless we've shifted from that slide.
Okay, no. Okay,
Oh, right.
fine,
I'm
that's
meaning
fine.
you're seeing
They're seeing
the
everything.
content on what is the campaign, right? Not
Yes.
just the
Yes.
word but the campaign.
They're seeing everything.
Yes,
They're-
we are.
Okay. just-
So back to the point that you guys had made, a well-crafted message is core to any campaign. And the good thing with a well-crafted message is the message can survive your campaign and still get to the audience. And you'll see, when I show you some examples, your message can survive your campaign. One, your message can even be before your campaign, right? So you could have a message that you were using for, let's say you use it for a conference, and then you realize that when you did that conference, the reaction to that particular message or the idea that you delivered in that message is still resonating with people. You can then have a campaign that you use as a fundraiser. So you had a campaign talking about, I don't know, tell me something that you would probably do if you did a campaign for Rise Night. Because you do drug addiction and all those things.
That's actually what I was said for substance misuse prevention program, which is our office program.
Okay, so if you did some sort of drug prevention, substance misuse prevention, wow. What that mean? Substance misuse prevention, I understand, is the technical term that you as a technocrat in that area would use to speak to your development partners. But how would you use it to talk to somebody who is struggling with ganja smoking?
But so the prevention part means that we're focusing on before you even get there,
Okay,
to the point where you're struggling. So the prevention entails awareness building and education, so persons have the facts, especially.
well, how would you target me before I get there? There's a predisposition to that, so you're.
No, you're focusing on persons who use, which would speak to treatment. But given what is happening in the landscape, no, what we have to target is actually prevention to try and not get especially our younger population to start using.
Right, so tell me, how would you, and this is how you're building message now, because part of the message building is what? It's a very critical thing. You have to know your audience, right? So if you, what is the profile of someone? And you could give me psychographic profile, if you understand what that is. You could give me demographic profile, you could give me geographic profile, you could even give me, what's the fourth one? What's it? Psychographic, demographic, geographic, and behavior. What's the psychographic profile of a person who you would target for prevention in this society?
So let me try to explain more. So currently, we focus, a lot of the work that we do is done within the school system.
Okay,
So one of our key partners is the Ministry of Education and Youth.
okay, I got
Which
you.
is to grant access. Now, what we want to be able to do, so that part of it is fine. But let's say, for example, we wanted to expand the.
Sorry, we just had our scanning read.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Maybe.
Right, let's say, for example, we wanted to get private sector funding to expand the counseling that we're able to offer to parents who suspect that their children are potentially overexposed to because of what is happening either within the community, somebody being.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Then what we would do with the private sector is crafted as this is a way to safeguard the future workforce so that we don't lose more of our children to the refugees associated with drug addiction. Of which there are ample examples, given what is happening in the States and given the increase of the substances.
Availability, okay, I got you. So I think you answered the question I was going after.
And it's persons in terms of the demographic, especially those children who are from communities where the parents otherwise would not be able to afford this kind of counseling or follow-up and support service.
Okay, right.
So we can provide it without cost.
So you do that psychosocial support too,
Yeah.
and you could do it as a preventative measure as well as a curative measure.
Yes.
Gotcha. All right, okay, so let's say you did a campaign that, or one of your workshops among different schools, within different schools, and then you found that something from it emerged. One day you were doing a campaign, some activity, and some students come up with a song, and it really, and then you decide to carry it across, and it's starting to really build a momentum, and you realize that that particular demographic of young people in terms of age and gender and socioeconomic conditions are responding well. You can pick that and create a campaign out of it as a way of accelerating your reach, heightening the visibility of your message. There are different, but the message is going to be core. And again, the message makes the experience consistent because when you do a campaign, which as we said is a series of activities, coordinated, aimed at meeting a specific objective. When you do a campaign, you end up delivering your message on various types of platforms or media. So it could be media in terms of traditional media that transmits messages. It could be media in terms of something that's a bit more interactive, like a social media. It could even just be a t-shirt, that's like a apparel where, people, you just kind of advertise the message, or it could be some kind of outdoor, whether it be physical outdoor or digital outdoor, or some strange installation that you put somewhere to draw people's attention. There are various types of things, but the issue is, if I see a billboard with your message, and I see somebody wearing a t-shirt, and I'm in half a tree somewhere and I see a major installation, all of a sudden, who are these people? What are they doing? Or if I see it and the message resonates, it means, oh, it's here, and I'm reminded there. And so that's why you have to have a good message. And so that when you coordinate your activities and you slap your message on these various types of platforms, media, whatever you call them, or channels, that increases the efficacy of your effort. All right, let me see how this thing works. Give me some fire. Yes.
So it's almost, to continue on what you're saying, it's almost like something very short and very to the point, and you can put it on various
Yes.
platforms, channels, spaces, very consistent. So wherever persons are, they see types of campaigns, passing on the bus, types of campaigns, same thing, they'll know exactly that that's your campaign, that's your takeaway message.
Yeah, and it's important, well, I mean, we're not gonna go specifically into length of message, but she's right, it's can't too long, can't have, so that's why you could,
Something catching.
yes, that's it, something that has a hook,
Yeah.
right? And so I know that sometimes, especially a lot of times, people who end up working in development sort of straddle development and academia, and academics, we don't come right title for things, wow. Different situation. And so sometimes you don't realize that, like I said to you, the terms you use are perfectly fine to the audience that you're trying to get your funding from, and the other technocrats who understand substance misuse, something. But that's not language that you're going to use when it's time to hit the road, because it's not the form that your audience is going to easily resonate with, because that's just not them. That's not the world they live in, right? Yes, Shoshana.
Right, I was just thinking about like the process of trying to find what would resonate with your audience, like what goes into that process. Because we did a last minute campaign for Giving Tuesday. We know Giving Tuesday.
Right, yeah.
Yes, everybody know Giving Tuesday. So Giving Tuesday it's largely a US thing, but you can see how it's nicely resonate. Giving Tuesday is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And people don't, organizations ask for donation. There are some organizations that actually find that Giving Tuesday from the Tuesday after Thanksgiving straight down to Christmas is their highest earner of fund donations for the year, right? So it becomes a huge space that people in this kind of work focus on, because people feel a little bit more generous, because you see how Thanksgiving flows right into the Christmas season, and so it really take advantage of the spirit of giving, and organizations have found that they earn a lot during that time. So Trisha, try the strategy.
I'm trying to start it. And also it follows the whole consumerism, because Black Friday.
All right.
And then Cyber Monday, so everything, so look at them, want to take the whole week and turn it into something, so they stay Tuesday, so that's how we do Tuesday. So I decided, that I was gonna call it the Learn Lucas campaign, because we want, Lucas workers to be able to learn, and we've heard the stories, you have it for 10 years, and you still have new symptoms, they have symptoms, so to learn it is a whole double. So we're thinking that we want to have them, set up the space as a learning center. So it's like a kickoff point. So then my president said, Learn Lucas sound academic, but in my head, Learn Lucas sounds straightforward.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm just thinking about, and now because the campaign was last minute, and then it made it in time, posted Monday, and then Tuesday, we pushed it as much as possible. So now we're saying give every Tuesday, learn new ones, you know what I mean? So it's like we're catching up with, to try to keep consistent with the message. But because, one person said it's all academic, some other people get it, so I'm just thinking, what really goes into making sure that your hook is something that's relatable
Right.
to as many people that you want to pay attention.
I'm glad you bring that up because, you know, as we learn together, I don't know if someone is saying something. Sorry, guys, if you're putting your hand up, because I think Zara or Anne will be back soon to help me here if you're putting up your, I don't see anybody. All right.
I'm still on
Okay, right. So
Kalando,
Zara,
so I'll note you if persons raise their hand.
got you. Thanks. Thank you. Right. So to Trishana's point, effective messaging is going to, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but one key thing is testing. In this market, a lot of times, even with commercial marketing, people don't really test messages because testing a message costs money. Because it requires you to literally design the collateral, and after some approvals, you then go to a section of your target audience and ask them how it go. Get their reaction. Are they getting from it what you want? So testing costs money, and that's why a lot of times people, and in this sector usually have even less money to spend on communication. So, you know, but you can find cheap ways to test. You can determine to call up a couple of people coming to you, call up a couple of people and say, what do you think about this? I mean, I do that all the time, even though at different points you can access funding to do proper testing. But if I know in my WhatsApp group or the various WhatsApp groups that I'm in or in my own phone, what do you call it now? We call it your contact list. If I know that there are a couple of people, if I can find 8 people who fit the target audience of what I'm doing, I call them and say, okay, what do you think of this? I ask them no question. So I know it's not as scientific as it's supposed to be, but at least I can get some feedback. That's one thing, Trishana. The other part that's very important though is timing. Because good creative work takes time. And so you need the time to actually do the work, to design the message, to then test it. And then have enough time for the test to validate or indicate some changes so that you then fix it and then implement. So the thing you're going to need to do is a lot of forward planning. Yes, children first.
One strategy based on interacting with our target audience and the persons that we want to reach whenever we plan and execute a campaign. We typically try to do focus group, and with the unit, the Bashi Bus being mobile, it allows us the opportunity to really interact and engage with these persons. So whichever parish we go in, we try to get feedback from these persons within our target audience to say, this message or this campaign that we are planning to promote, does this resonate with you? What do you think we can do? What do you think we can change? What is the hope? What young people going
What's really working for you, right?
Yeah. And this has been one effective method that we've used in, for instance, we had a Protect Your Peace campaign where like youth in volatile community really resonated with that because it kind of have a play based on our messaging about, you know, sexual reproductive health. And then when they think about protecting peace, they're thinking weapon. So it worked.
Right. Oh, yeah, peace as in,
Yeah.
oh, got you. But peace as in IEC, but you mean EAC. That's clever. And obviously they would have communicated that worked, you know, that IEC would have resonated. So so I said 2 things, but there's a 3rd thing which remind me of your name, children first.
Kavina.
I didn't hear that peace thing.
They did a campaign about protect your peace. And it worked. It's a play on words for peace, as in obviously the peace building, but also peace as in a weapon. So that particular message worked very well, and she was saying input. So there is this 3rd piece about having this kind of disposition for research and data, and actually hearing from people and implementing that. And that is an attitude that says, I don't know everything. And even though I've spent 20 years doing this or 10 years doing it, I don't know everything because I'm dealing with human beings and human beings are discovering these things about themselves every day. So I am not going to know everything. Plus, I could be wrong about something, right? I could be wrong about something that worked last year. And 2, it is possible that though I am very 3, sorry, that though I'm very experienced at this thing, it is possible that somebody who is not as experienced and who may be fresh can give me an idea that changes everything that I've been doing before. So there's this attitude of humility that says, I am open to learning. And then because I'm open to learning, I'm going to use a process by which I learn, I hear, I listen, and I implement. And that's one of the ways that, you know, as far as developing your messaging, you can take that attitude when you have to test, because that's how you know, to Trishana's point. How do you know that the thing is going to work? You as the person who is very concerned about the issue and you're involved in the work, understand that after a while it's going to start to impact you in a different way. You know? When you just start doing the work, say, oh, I'm going to go help these young people, whatever. And then you're in it for 2 years and you say, wait, there's so many other things. Sometimes you feel very overwhelmed that you can't help them because there's so many things that they need, that they need help with, and you only have this much. You almost feel a little frustrated. Yeah, you feel, who said helpless, right? Sometimes you feel a little helpless because you're saying, wow. I remember even with working Project Star, somebody said to me once, there's a woman who is pregnant, but she's disabled and she's in a wheelchair, or she's right? And she's having difficulty because she can't move and she's sleeping on the ground and so on and so forth. And I'm hearing the story. And I know I want to help. But I know immediately as well that the way we are structured, we can't help. But you're saying to yourself, but isn't that the very reason? You know, like, how could you not? But you're saying, but I can't, but I need to, but I can't, but I know why I can't help. And so I know that the work of trying to improve the conditions of our fellow citizens who find themselves in spaces that we are not. And even when you set up structures and you have partners, there's just some ways that you just can't help that situation, and that's heartbreaking. And you could just say, I'm just going to leave this work because it feels pointless to me that I'm aware that there's a person who needs a bed. And sometimes just the issue of calling up courts or whomever to beg a bed, you find that what you really need to solve is a situation where she doesn't need to beg a bed. That's what you need to solve, right? But solving that might require you 5 years with just she alone, so that after those 5 years, she doesn't need to beg a bed. Who's going to finance that? For that problem to be solved? But you know in your heart that this is a problem I need to solve. This lady should not have to be begging a bed. How do I fix that problem for her sustainably? Yeah, I mean, of course, you beg the bed to start, yeah, because the way to the solution is not to ignore that. To say, oh, well, you shouldn't have to beg a bed, so I'm not going to beg one. No, because now she actually needs a little comfort. She needs to improve her condition even temporarily, and then you work on the situation where when that bed needs to change, she can buy one herself, right? But to solve that problem may require a focus on that particular situation, her entire ecosystem of her family, and whether she has education, and based on her disability, how is she able to be gainfully employed, or she's going to take care of the baby. All of these things you need to solve just to get it to a place where she doesn't have to come and beg a bed. Difficult work. Difficult work. And if you look at that situation and say, boy, I'm going to spin up a campaign right now to try and get some money for her, you can imagine what you even start to think about to get that campaign going, to solve that problem sustainably. It's difficult work, right? And most times not enough money. But let's talk about the different types of campaigns. Right? Sorry, that took a turn. Right? So let's talk about the different types of campaigns. We've got educational campaigns. We know what those are. Maybe it's the thing Trishana talked about, trying to educate people about lupus. And that's right. That may not necessarily have any. It could include people donating, but it could just be that you're trying to raise awareness, or Nadine and her drug abuse thing, just raising awareness among young people, right? You could have an advocacy campaign. We know specifically what that is. You need the conditions to change. You need the government to make some decisions around creating an enabling environment for people. That takes on a different flavor. How you know, what are the different strategies you're going to use?
Can I just say something, because I think it would be helpful to something that was clarifying earlier. And And it speaks to one of the reasons why someone pointed out that Learn Lupus was probably not a good name for the campaign, because we are actually trying to raise funds to set up a educational hub for lupus warriors.
Got you, so
The
maybe
point
you
was
are
that
more
Learn
than.
Lupus made it sound like an educational campaign instead of a
In,
fundraising.
but in fact, it's a fundraising
It's a
campaign,
fundraising.
but the name could make people feel like it's
Right.
this. Got you. So you see, you have to be very clear on what it is. And because the nature of the work that we do in this space, there's a bleed, yeah, because sometimes I say people have to know about it before them give money. Right? I remember when we were looking at the first social IPO thing for Star, and we were thinking, how do we raise money? I know we went to thinking we were going to raise $1 billion from Jamaica, because lots of people in the investment, and they're gonna like the idea that citizens are going to invest, and we learned quite a lot about that situation. Happy to have learned it, but we learned a lot. But the idea was, okay, but how are some of the conversations we had included, how would people just go give their money if they don't know anything about this thing, right? And then Project Star itself moved from something that was not as fully understood. So I remember all of the various conversations that we had with lots of corporates, trying to get them to just understand. So we had to go on our own little education campaign before we talked about fundraising, and part of that was literally having sessions with corporate leaders, talking to them about the fact that we wanted to set up this thing and approach it in a particularly in a particular way. And the challenge we came across in that whole educational effort, if we were to consider the way we did it as part of our educational campaign, is that most people understood the issue of targeting crime and violence in one way. And every meeting we went into, people understood it one way, and then you found that you had to be trying to get them to see it differently, to say, oh, it's not just about going to target at-risk youth, because the larger narrative about solving crime in Jamaica was primarily that, target at-risk youth. Most people spend money on that. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on targeting at-risk youth. And so we now have to be saying to people, targeting at-risk youth should be an and. You can't just target at-risk youth to solve a problem sustainably, because the youth does not live by themselves in this space. So you have to target the whole ecosystem. So you have to look at the children, you have to look at the parents, you have to look at at-risk youth, you have to look at the elderly, you have to focus on employment, you have to focus on infrastructure. It's not one thing, it's all the things. And so we needed to use our educational campaign efforts, which were largely Zoom meetings, presenting a 20-odd page, 20-odd slide presentation on Project Star, and having conversations an hour at a time. That was the campaign. Thankfully, we had a business leader like a Keith Duncan, who can talk to anybody as long, he has all the right features that people actually listen to him. Then he was the president of the PSOG at the time, so he also had that office of authority that had some weight. So there was a lot of social capital that he could leverage and talk to business people, because he also understood business people, and because he himself is a businessman. And so we had all those elements, which I'm using as an example to you, that if you're going to set up an education campaign, or even though we're talking about messages today, there are these things that you have to focus on the messenger of your message, right? And in that case, we had a really good messenger, but we also had somebody like a Sacha Brown who had a lot of experience in the area of actually delivering this kind of thing, and could speak to people about the technical components of it, to say it's not just at-risk youth, because when you take the at-risk youth out of the community and go intervention them, and then you bring them back, you're plugging them back into an ecosystem that is not prepared for them. And so you can't see any sustainability over that, because how you think about solving the problem needs to change. And that took us a while, months, lots and lots and lots of conversations, and what, 2+ years into Star, and we're going to year 3, we managed to get 50 corporates at least, and more than $500 million in funding to get the work done. And you also find that crime fighting is a very expensive undertaking on both sides, right? Crime costs us a lot. Oh, somebody's calling me, and therefore now interrupting the thing. Crime fighting, where am I now? What do I find? Never had this, so. So just, I find this screen. Oh, I think I need to. Okay, I need to take the screen off and then. Bring it back, right?
It should have PowerPoint open, so I should.
I have to come off because I also need to close the app that caused that disruption. Apologies, folks, not in the room. Okay. All right. Yes, crime fighting very expensive. Crime costs the country a lot, and solving the crime costs the country a lot, right? Then you have fundraising campaigns. We know those are very straightforward, but as we were seeing earlier, sometimes for your work, you have to think about multiple campaigns that then sort of flow into each other. Because in Trishana's case, if she had the time, she probably would have had to do a nice education campaign first, that on Good Giving Tuesday then morphs into a fundraising campaign, right? Yes.
Yeah, glad to get back on that. Based on what she was saying about our president, Dr. Toller Reid, saying that it would be more academic. Now, back then we had a chart to show the symptoms and the signs of the autoimmune disorder, which is very, very easy. Anybody can catch on. But one of the things is that people is not too much aware of this autoimmune disorder, lupus, right? Or we call it SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus. So therefore, what she's doing, I'm backing her 100% because people need to have the basic idea of what lupus is, because many people think that it is contagious or cancerous, but it's not cancerous. It's just where the organs go against each other. You understand? Which is the autoimmune disorder. There are many other variants that we can think of, but they will not know about it. They will just know about the basic, right, of the SLE or the R, which is rheumatoid arthritis, right?
Okay.
So in her scope of practice as a rheumatologist and a consultant, you understand, she might think that, okay, it does make sense to bring this to some person who would not understand the medical field or whatever, but I believe what our ED is doing, she's trying to get all the basic information. Okay, this is what lupus is. You know about cancer, you know about prostate, you know about nephrology, as in renal failures and everything, etc. So we wanted to know about lupus.
Right. No, and even as you talk about that, and you think about how you're going to design your message, even your educational campaign, you always have to go back to your audience, right? And find ways to ensure that what the audience requires, they need. And I say that because sometimes we, as the expert in the area, we think this is important, and this is important for people to know, and so you want to tell them, and you're trying to tell them everything that's important for them to know. And you may not recognize that in the psychology of how people absorb information, there are many things behaviorally that people are considering. First of all, which I learned when I was doing the COVID thing, when we were doing vaccination and so on, and you were trying to tell people about protecting themselves against COVID. Some of the feedback that came back, people said, "Me not the vaccine because my family no sicky." You know? Self-efficacy, or maybe they just survive that. My strong, say COVID kept me, maybe just have to deal with that. Trying to educate someone who has that particular belief, your efforts are going to be farcical because the person, you're not meeting where the minds are, right? So if you want to get that person to adjust behavior, you have to go somewhere else. It doesn't matter that you have all the facts and the science on your side. The human brain, belief and knowledge impact behavior. If a person believes they are not going to be impacted, and they have some knowledge that affirm their own belief, they will not behave the way that you want, right? Right. So sometimes when you're trying to then impact people's behavior through your education campaign, you have to have belief objectives and knowledge objectives even before you come to behavior.
Right.
So you first have to interrupt what their belief.
What's a belief objective?
Yes, you design a belief objective,
What
which
is a
is
belief
the,
objective?
this is what I want people to believe about the thing. But you have to start, Trishana, with what do they currently believe? Which means you need to go get some data. What do they believe about this thing? Because if the equation is knowledge and belief impact behavior, and you know there's a behavior you're trying to modify, you have to interrupt the belief system and interrupt the knowledge base. And bring it to what you want.
How do you interrupt?
There's a whole science around it.
Not that part. Well, I kinda get that part, I know that there's a whole science. But interrupting the behavior, cause for example,
But the behavior comes down the road after. Behavior change takes time.
right,
But it
maybe
comes
the
down
part
after.
that with social media, people kind of, there's a way that people view social media. Like you just see something and like they take away a conclusion, then they read it and then they read the caption. They not even probably don't even, especially if it's an image with a lot of words on it. They just see something, here's an unrelated example, right? Non-human development space. So like when Terry Curry left Rising Stars, because she wanted to spend more time to do other things. And you know, when you have a show like that, sometimes you miss birthdays, weddings, major things. And she just wanted to stop missing all those things and go live the rest of her life. But all in all, people go on the whole TV to fire and give the role to the other girl. And all she has said in the thing, I am the one who want them just not say.
Right.
Yes, and we go back to what,
again.
we go back to what I said. People believe what they want, right?
Yeah, true.
And yeah. And so it depends on what, if she wanted to interrupt. Don't give me any more Lucas examples. Is that what you're gonna do, or I'm gonna go to another? Because I don't want to spend so much time on a specific.
No, it's a matter,
because we can come back to
talking
it.
about, the self-sustenance of, about COVID and everything, and I am saying that some people medically even understand that this one is not a flu-like symptoms, you understand, the
Right.
underlying issue, but it's more like a respiratory, which is had to do with the lungs.
Yes, so, well, I'm very using those words, because the point I wanted to make as we close it up and go to this young lady here is, when you are able to interpret, break down the science and make it live,
Layman terms.
in a way, use layman terms, in a way that the person can relate, you have a better chance of getting them to pay attention. May not get them to act yet, but they may pay attention because now you're giving them information. Like when you say, this have to do with your lungs, like you say, it can mash up all the organs. If you use that kind of language, a person who is not heavily scientific know what mash up mean, right? And if you say, well, it can mash up all the organs or the body and kill itself or some language like that, you don't need all of your nice fancy explanations that come from the autonomy, right? But the person gets it. And then when they come to you now, you can give all the science. The science is for you, the medicine is for you, and all of your colleagues who are in the medical field. The human being just wants some treatment for what they need. Because they want to ride a bicycle, they're not interested to read an anatomy book, right? So, you go read the anatomy book, me go ride my bicycle. Me sick, you just give me a pill. You just me want to go pharmacy. Exactly, pharmacy, prescription, take the pill, go ride the bicycle. I don't want to know any of the language and all those things. That's not important to me. It's important to you, and you're excited by it, and you are saying, oh, you must know this. And you spend all the time writing these brochures and putting the language and say, what does this mean, and break it down and person
know what is happening.
But what I'm saying is, how you educate. As a teacher, the teacher know, you went to teacher's college, so you know enough things. But if you're a teacher 2-year-old, all of the pedagogical knowledge that you have, the 2-year-old is not going to be a very benefit to them. So you have to break it. Just focus, exactly, just practice it. Now, if the person asks and say, hey, explain it to me.
Then you elevate.
Then you elevate it. But I would say, start with the basic. A human being just want to understand you.
Which would advise, advise in a super practice.
I just want, based on what he was sharing, for the first time here about the lupus awareness. Well, I know about the lupus itself, due to Tony Braxton having it, so, and.
Okay. Tony Braxton.
Yeah, the first of her heart, and Selena Gomez. Here at home, I don't know much, so I wanted to, I wanted to know, Who are the target audience that you guys go to?
Wait, we don't want to specifically, we can talk to them in the break because we have some more things.
Why I ask is because when he mentioned that, what I've been learning is that sometimes we can't necessarily assume that everybody will understand. Because what you may understand, what me may understand, are two different understandings. So.
Yes,
because
that's
of-
more generally than.
Yeah, so why,
Right.
that was the reason why
So
I
there's
asked, because I want to understand the whole process of it.
So you see, that's just good, and having that curiosity, that might immediately mean what you say in business, that this person is a lead, like a qualified lead, right? You're actually interested in the thing, which means you're open to learning and so on. And it's to the part of Trisha was saying this, if you think about it generally. And your question is, how do you, and I think it's what I was trying to find out from the leaders, and how do you find this audience that is going to be important
Yeah.
for your issue? There are many ways. Obviously, if you're dealing with, like she explained, if you're dealing with students in school, you can't deal with all students in school, because in truth, your issue doesn't affect all students in school, right? In all schools. So you specifically go to some schools, and then when you do it, in terms of knowing your audience, you have to kind of profile. Very similar to how we talk about buyer persona on social media, whatever. You have to do a profile to figure out specifically. So you know, in this space and in communication, we say there's no such thing as general public. And we know that most times when people are saying general public, they're saying this is important to everyone in the country. You think it's important to everyone in the country, and perhaps it is that everyone in the country having the knowledge will benefit, huh?
Aren't there things that is important to everyone in the country?
Maybe
Because they don't see that important.
maybe it is that everyone in the country would
Like when
benefit.
scammer come and them different.
Yes,
riverbank and
but
say-
you see why some people, why is that every year we go back to riverbanks to get those same people to try and move? Because they're there all the time and they say, no, got to me, I may survive it. Right.
Not even the basic needs are important to everybody.
So
Like
goes
some
back
people will
to-
tell you.
Knowing your audience and being very specific.
Yeah.
So that's why
When
you
you
don't
have
just
a
do.
campaign, you say keep yourself safe in the storm, and everybody else have to, including those who, you know, they.
But I don't think it's important to them.
Yes,
I know, that's important.
because remember, Trishana, those in this space and even like government, there are things you have to be, it have to be important to you, right? And as a government, you have to make sure that you protect your people. But as a human being, you will find that not everybody wants the protection you're offering them. And not everyone sees themselves as in need of protection. And that's why when you're doing your profile, that's why I mentioned to you guys, psychographic profile, demographic profile, geographic profile, behavioral profile. All of these things matter in the knowing of your audience, because what you think the person wants may not be what the person wants. And it may not be the thing they're going to respond to. And I said, oh, but this is so important. Yes, it is true. But it may not be true for that person that you're targeting.
As you keep speaking, I was thinking in terms of, and I don't even know if it was an intentional campaign, but certainly it speaks to the understanding of persons' beliefs and behaviors. I'm thinking in terms of Trump and Vance, when they made that statement about the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. And even though Vance about them eating cookies, and even though there were stats, you know, like the lady who first started it, they actually found her cat. She was the one who said, well, somebody stole her cat and ate it. That same cat was found days later in her basement. Even though Trump was saying that the Haitians are destroying Springfield and we have to go and rescue them from this takeover, when the mayor, the person responsible for the city, kept saying how these Haitians actually help to stimulate the economy. Because the US persons were not, first of all, staying from the jobs that come today, but they come tomorrow. But it's the Haitians who are actually driving that road. But then, you know, as I said, without even investing, you know, any money for that campaign, what they were able to do was act on what they know.
Some people believe.
Exactly, their beliefs, how they regard immigrants. So
Yes.
to hell with the actual facts, to hell with.
Yeah. So when people say, oh, but the fact, They don't care about the facts because they have accepted a fact in their own mind. And like guys, I said to you, it's a true thing.
And it drove-
Belief and knowledge influence behavior.
Yeah.
So,
Well, for
and then each of those things, Trishana, to get to your point of how you change the behavior, each piece of it requires its own set of work. How do I disrupt somebody's belief? Belief is, I mean, if you grow up as a Adventist and all the Adventist principles, and that is what drives your life, and you're like 35 years old now, you know how difficult it is going to be to dislodge you from all of that 35 years of belief to get you to believe something else. That's how human beings are. So we have to manage our expectations and try to educate ourselves. And I think that is one of the missing pieces in this sector because you deal with people so much. And because a lot of times you don't have a lot of budget to deal with your marketing and communication, which is such a critical part of your work. You don't get to invest in the behavioral science that pertains to how you communicate and get the results that you're looking for. It's a missing piece in the sector.
What I'm thinking, Kalando, is that the campaign is usually one tool in a bundle of tools
Yes,
to influence behavior change. So it's not that the campaign is gonna be the end all and be all of.
exactly. The campaign itself is
Yeah.
really a stimulant toward the
Yeah.
behavior change. But getting behavior change is something you have to stick with.
At least.
You know, it's 15 years.
Yeah.
15 years, according to even Dr. Gale from UA, in terms of shifting some of that behavior. Between 15 and 20 years of sustained investment to see any kind of significant, meaningful change in an issue.
And that's why there's a challenge with some certain funded projects that have such short lifespans. So you start something and you know that technically speaking, 3 months is not gonna make a difference. You know, 1 year is not gonna make a difference. 2 years, you're just scratching the surface of, you know, that.
The issue you want to address.
The repetition and saying this is important. You need that sustain, the sustenance.
Yeah.
Changing behavior.
I mean, I'll tell you something like this. When we do employment for like Project Star, we say getting the person the job is not sufficient. Right? Because if you're looking for meaningful change, you need to be able to find a way to help the person to stay in the job.
True.
And the person needs to be in the job. Are they still in the job after 6 months, a year, 18 months, 24 months? So we have post-employment support for up to 2 years because that's how you're going to be able to make the change. The person have to be able to stay in the job, and you're talking now about start saving your money, get a little bit more qualification, move up in the job, you know, having paid vacation, health insurance. The quality of your life is changing. Just getting a work is not it.
Did you find that the Project Star organism evolved as the team understood the nuances on the ground?
Yes.
So did you start out saying, okay, we're just gonna connect people to jobs?
No, we always knew that just connecting to the job was not the answer.
Okay.
What we moved to was moving from 12 months to 24 because we realized you needed to provide more support. And we also realized that the support is not just for the person in the job, you have to also support the organization employing the person because sometimes organizations don't have the right understanding about the difference in the social norms of the people who are coming in. So you have to do that work. As I tell you, it's a very expensive thing. So you say, oh, I'm gonna get 100 people. We just crossed the line of 200 people employed. And our goal was 100 people per community per year. You can imagine that? Very ambitious goal. And we say, oh, I'm going after it. And then you find out, whoa, there's a massive employability issue. Right? I mean, just trying to get people ready for work and Nadine and the organization work with us. Just trying to get them ready for work. You have to sometimes
Teach them.
beyond that, after you literally do a screening, you find this person cannot mentally even sit in a room. You need counseling. So you have to pull them out, send them to get some psychosocial support, and then when you find that you pull them back in now and then say, okay, let me prepare you for work. Then you put them in the work, and then you still have to do a bit of hand holding. That's how you solve the problem, and we still don't know if that will solve the problem for that person, you know, because everybody is different. But we know that it's not sufficient to just say, go get a heart training and go get a work. That's not going to be sufficient to change your life because you could have done that on your own and your life would be different already, right? The circumstances are different. So we've had to adjust because near 3 years, we're in our year 3, and this is the first time we've crossed the 200 employed, right? Because it's been very challenging.
They start to evaluate the student.
What institution? 1 second, Heart. Oh, okay. Right, Heart is a significant partner. So let's look quickly at this. For your education campaign, we know we're talking about most times use that for awareness building and information sharing. For your advocacy, you know you want to influence public opinion around something you want people to feel differently about. We saw a lot of advocacy work and public education work and behavioral change work going into HIV/AIDS. But you know, HIV/AIDS between 1980 when that breakout and when we even hit any kind of proper, that's a nice 20 years of sustained investment in education and behavior change and policy, and they're still doing it, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing some results, but that's 20 years.
Yeah, but I like what I'm seeing, and just how they're crafting messages now and the evolution of.
Right, of that whole message crafting. Yeah. I have one example here.
You know.
National Family Planning Board, right.
Teenage pregnancy gone down, they're targeting now, begging people to get pregnant.
Right, because right, because what, 50 years ago, there was a two is better than too many campaign that worked too well. Right, all right, so fundraising, obviously, and we talk about solicit donation or resources. You do know that sometimes when you're trying to, Trishana, even in your quest to raise funds to create a space, it's a physical space, you could actually request a physical space that answers the question, right? So an organization could have, assets that they are prepared to convert. So in your fundraising, you think about fundraising and resourcing, because you probably would not raise enough money just because the history of how people give money and people it's small and it's not enough and what you need, but you could find an organization that is sympathetic to the issue, find that they have a room on their building that they're prepared to give to the issue, and suddenly you resourced this thing that you can then sometimes a resource could be an expert who can come and provide some services or train up your people or so. So when you think of your fundraising, don't just think about getting money, think about resourcing your organization. Lady?
I'm very interested in this fundraising campaign.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Sorry, Kalando.
Yes.
There's a comment online from Kimberly.
Yes, Kimberly.
Kimberly Marriott. Can go ahead, Kimberly.
Honestly, I've actually forgotten the question at this point.
Oh, so sorry, didn't see it before.
Sorry about that.
I think maybe let me look back at the notes I have here. Just kind of wondering, I know you mentioned the various ways to segment the audience. Does that merge at any point with the type of campaign? So for example, if when you're looking at, because I saw that there were 4 types you had and we're kind of drilling down into the different ones. I'm not sure if you're going to reference it. But the matter of whether it's demographic, geographic, psychographic, or behavioral, does that impact at all? Or is that influenced based on the type of campaign that you're taking on? Whether it's fundraising or educational or whatever, is there a hand in hand or is it crossed?
Right, that kind of profiling matters for all of them, because, for example, if you're doing fundraising, depending on what your audience profile for your fundraising is, because remember, you could be targeting a different set of people to help with funds than your actual constituents, right? So let's say you are dealing with at-risk youth, but your fundraising campaign is going to target corporates or very wealthy people.
For sure.
Right?
Sure.
So you have to profile the very wealthy people, because that now becomes your audience for your campaign. Whereas if you're actually targeting the youth to try and introduce a new behavior or to modify a current behavior, then the psychographic, geographic, demographic, and behavioral profile of that audience would still come into play. But it's for anyone based on, it's for all campaign types, because it's going to be for all audience types. Make sense?
Yeah, man. Okay. I was just wondering if there was one that kind of, in case of fundraising, I mean, in the back of my mind, I thought in the case of fundraising, maybe like the demographic is going to be the greater priority than any other type. While in the
Oh,
case
that's
of
what
the
you mean.
educational, the behavior or psychographic might be more important than the demographics. If you get what I'm
Oh,
thinking, just
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of seeing if
I see what you mean.
on a pendulum, for example, on a spectrum, are you really
Yeah.
pulling, imagining a graphic here, like a map, are you kind of pulling more value to what your behavioral or psychographic expresses compared to what your geographic expresses in a behavior, in an education campaign
Oh, okay,
versus
I
a
see what you mean.
fundraising that's definitely going to be looking more at the demographics
Yeah.
than necessarily caring about the geo, particularly in this space now. Just kind of thinking back to what Tishana mentioned about the giving. It's global. The geographic may not matter, for example,
Right,
but it
except,
might be
okay,
more,
you know
just
what, Kimberly? Kimberly, is going to matter depending on the types of decisions you are going to make. Let me
got
explain.
you.
If you determine that you are doing a fundraising effort and you're targeting uptown people, etc., right? The decision for a medium or where you may put a billboard is going to matter where they live, because you're saying, I want the people when they're driving home to see this, so I need a billboard in the Kingston 8 area, right? The type of the psychographic profile will help you to determine the kind of messaging, because the psychographic would say people who are very wealthy, business, finance people, maybe they're more finance, or it could be somebody who's very wealthy, but they're into health. The messaging I write needs to tap into what that person believes, because the psychographic talks about their belief system, their attitudes towards stuff like that. And so that could influence what kind of influencer, if you decide that a part of your campaign needs an influencer, or it could influence even what color, or it could influence the type of images that you choose, because the person needs to see themselves in the advertising. So I take where you're going, and I appreciate that. And I love that you ask it in that way, because we now get to expert a little bit more. Psychographic, geographic, demographic is going to matter for a number of reasons, and they could matter in different ways depending on your campaign. So it may not be more this or more that. It's going to matter in a sort of a mixed bag, because if you're saying we're going to use TV, then maybe the demographic component of it will talk to you about age group, sex, gender, what program are you putting that in, because maybe on a Saturday sports, it's more men that you're targeting. So maybe you put your ad on when men are supposed to be watching TV, right? And so that's one of the ways that the demographic information could inform your decision for your campaign. And like we talked earlier about where people live could inform where you put a piece of outdoor advertising, if that's part of your campaign. Then people's attitudes to health might determine that that's why you put a picture of a very healthy person or a person going on hikes or whatever, because the person you're targeting is going to see that image and it's going to relate to them. And then behaviorally, if it's somebody who's very communal and very outgoing, extrovertish type, then it could also influence what is even the color of the campaign design, because the semiology suggests that extroverts are going to be more attracted to red. So it's going to factor in for a number of reasons, and it could influence various decisions that you make for your campaign. Hope I haven't given you too much information.
No, man. I was actually wondering if there was like an already kind of done for you, if this then that, but I understand what you're saying, that it is very much nuanced to the nature of what you're trying to achieve and who your overall audience is.
I love that question. Maybe we should create. Maybe you could actually, after analyzing the data, you could say we could actually find that for these types of campaigns, considering this over that might actually help, or we've seen it work. Maybe you're just
more bang for buck or better impact.
Maybe you just give me an idea of something I can go do and make some money. Thanks, Kimberly, Julie.
I'll take royalties.
Right. Yeah, we have to share, right?
Yes. About that I'm interested in this fundraising thing, because actually, for our guys, one of our fundraising projects is selling of cookies.
We still do that.
Definitely.
The cookie them healthy now, because you know, it's the type of society we now want more healthy things.
No.
Cause you saw, I heard that Candy Craze closed down, the one in Barbican, so the one
Yeah.
across from Sovereign North. And then the Manor Park one also closed down. You'd think that a sweetie factory as a sweetie, you know, store would do very well because people have children, but then again, maybe it's not doing as well because we don't have as many children, because with two is better than too many, won't work very well. But also parents are probably a lot more conscientious about how much sweet and you know, type of thing they give to their children. So a store like that doesn't flourish. Don't know, we don't know, I'm sort of speculating, but
Make the children hyperactive.
genuinely curious about whether the cookies are healthier.
Actually, yes. Now we all know that most of the firms and so on, drinks and otherwise, they're cutting back on the sugar. And so we pay more money for less, because they're putting less raw material in and getting bigger profits for interesting times. However, for cookies, I just realized, my man, you know, they call it cookie campaign, we call it a cookie campaign, but I don't think it's much of a campaign. We're really been selling sort of in-house, so the children are involved, the leaders and so on, the levels. But definitely, we are aware that we could go bigger and larger, and as we go around, the person say, but we don't do it. They all know Girl Guides and cookies go together. Automatically, so we say, oh, you still selling cookies? Everywhere we go.
Oh, I love that message, Girl Guide and cookie go together, you know?
Like that.
Some sort of get your cookie, you know? There you go, writing your copy already. Very
Well,
well.
I wanted to get a little, you know, even some of the ways, some of the comments that would help to guide the process, because right now we're thinking that we should get out of just the in-house and
Go out.
get like, firms made for coffee breaks and so on. CPSS and people like this could use the cookies.
Yes,
So we could expand the market and make more funds.
that's true.
So
Nice
I
business
don't
thinking there.
comment, any helpful thing there for us.
We can come back and revisit that. Let's look at engagement campaigns, build community or drive participation, volunteer drive, social media challenges. Sometimes you just need to make sure your community is active, is involved in stuff, and everything is not necessarily, oh, I need to educate. Because if you already have a very well educated community that has already given money, you may just need to find a way to keep them engaged, because the engagement can pay off in other ways later. And so that's why people say, oh, you're having a cleanup. You just say, all right, let's go clean up, because people, they don't, you know, they just want to do something else. So you engage them in an activity.
Kalando, I wanted to ask something before we go on.
Yes.
And it's kind of related to what you just said about engagement. I know we talk a lot about targeting the campaign and that type of thing. But as Kim was speaking, I started thinking about like a secondary audience. Because sometimes you post something and then somebody has a rich uncle who does not use social media, but saw the campaign and said, oh, my uncle has whatever and can contribute this. So, and.
So you kind of a message that says share with a friend.
You know what I mean?
You can say donate and call a friend to do it or something.
Because sometimes the people you want.
Remember they did, you could use that same, or you could literally use that language depending on the audience. So you have a rich uncle, share with your rich uncle. And suddenly now it's contemporary because it's of the moment, people understand the term. It have a little, it have a vibe, as I said, because you're not using straightforward language, you're tapping into the culture, and then suddenly people are paying attention to your message. But the person might actually think about it and say, oh yeah, rich uncle. And the truth is, you would have to drive that some more. So you could say, what is the profile of a rich uncle? And you can make a little joke of it, and you create a little document and say, your rich uncle is this. And then all of a sudden now people are thinking, oh yeah, I know this person, rich uncle, come help contribute. You create a little thing out of that. And create some, well.
I was thinking about your Giving Tuesday, say I rich Uncle Friday.
What's that? There you go. Well, actually, on the Giving Day, it would say rich Uncle Friday.
Person's is aspirational, so person might want to just do something.
That's true. That's true. Look at that fantastic knowledge sharing happening today. So creativity, which is you just introduce a piece of creativity that you add to, because you're naming the stuff which Uncle Friday. Is gonna capture attention, because that would get people to pay attention, right? And if you never hear of this rich uncle thing before, you say, "Oh, yes."
Everybody say, wow.
You know, and then you're gonna pay attention to it. And if you heard of it and you think you have a rich uncle in your life, it might actually cause you to behave in a way that increases the donation ultimately. At the very least, sometimes, like I said, what we learned with Star when we went off our $1 billion we thought Jamaican citizens were gonna give is that we had increased awareness to the extent that now people were calling us to come into the Zoom calls, right? We were now getting invitations from companies to tell us more about this thing that we're hearing of, and we end up increasing our corporate donation, not as much donation from the public, because that increased visibility and everybody talking. Now you say, "Oh, Protestant, say, yeah, I saw that." No, we weren't. You know what I'm saying? Have you heard of Protestant? No, what is it? The attention that we got from that whole social IPO thing created the awareness that Donald did a lot of the work for us to get us into those rooms. So it cut down the time to explain to people what it is. People were now curious and people were calling us to come tell them more about the project. So creativity can get your attention. So here are some, remember we just talked about it, two is better than too many, right? This was one of those campaigns, that successful creative campaign. We are living it now because I gave up an article earlier this year to say Jamaica has an aging population, don't have enough children. And I was trying to figure a way, the net effect of that could be a few years from now, we're gonna have more foreigners coming in, because we don't have enough people to work, because we don't have no young people
I need another campaign.
to have more children. Here's another one, Jamaica Moves. Jamaica Moves was a very, Jamaica Moves was easy to do, right? Anyway, everybody remember Jamaica Moves? Yes, they did run into a little challenge with the minister and who was doing the thing, and people come up with different.
But so successful that other Caribbean countries took it on.
Right, and it was, and even diasporans in the UK, I saw Jamaica Moves UK, they were doing a whole thing, so this was a very successful kind of thing, and I really like the brand as well, they did a good job with that.
Yeah.
No Dirty Up Jamaica is another one. This is, I saw them do an installation in a park where they had this huge, I mean, the only thing I don't like is that they're not using the proper Jamaica, the Cassidy LePage Jamaican spelling, because that's not how you spell dirty if you use it right. But anyway, people get this. It's not even how you spell no, but anyway, it is what it is, and people are getting it. I saw them do a huge bag.
Oh, you're gonna drop that gem and walk away from that.
It's later on, I'll tell you how it's spelled. I saw them put he would like blow up a big bag with this in like a park, a town square. So that's another way that outside of the ads that they have, right? Outside of the ads that they have, they did like an outdoor installation, so to speak, of a big old garbage bag.
Song
And they did a song, right? And so as a campaign, they had a whole bunch of, and then of course, what do? They also do cleanups.
Yes.
Right, so you
Action,
have that action, pitch, deep and intro. I couldn't find a high res enough,
That was cool.
right? So say, you don't even have to see an ad to remember this.
Or know what it's about.
Or know what it's about, right? Pitch, leave and intro, which was a campaign to educate people about the proper use of a condom. And they did a whole campaign. Now, they made some choices. One of the choices the Ministry of Health made during that period is they usually launch a lot of their campaigns during World Cup and football on TV, because they know that's where the eyes are going to be. So during that time on TV is where you see these messages. During when you're watching track and field, Olympics, World Championship, football. And that was a strategic decision for the media choice that allowed them to really increase the visibility of their message and ultimately, because this one is a very clear, this is how you do it, right?
Yeah, that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
I have one worry,
One worry.
Yes, those that you've just mentioned here, as an example, they're almost governments are private sector led as opposed to NGOs.
Well, they're not Jamaica's NGO.
NGO, yeah.
Yeah.
But there are others. The truth of the matter is, a lot of these types of campaigns are the purview of government.
Yeah.
Government will have to do it. You also have a situation where your Minister of Health, current Minister of Health, does have a PhD in marketing.
Yeah.
So he's leveraging his acumen around a particular subject matter. It's, you need to market good health to the people.
And maybe a lot of us in the NGO sector are just not doing campaign.
That's true,
Yeah,
because you can't afford it.
No, we can't afford it.
Because
That's
you
what I'm
can't
saying.
afford it, because I guarantee
Yeah,
you,
that's
they
Yeah.
Jamaica moves on those HIV campaigns hundreds of millions of dollars, right? They get a lot of money to spend on that, because remember that HIV would have gotten a lot of global funding as well. And Jamaica, because we have such excellent professionals and such creative people, we could attract a lot of money to our work. And we were successful in that, and so they had a lot of money to spend on that sort of thing. You always find though that health issues globally, in every country, health issues are like an epidemic, pandemic type thing. They're gonna dump money into that, because you need people to be alive. And if people are dying, the society can't manage if you have too few people. And then remember that a sick population is a heavy burden on any economy, because it's not just the people who are sick that are impacted. Not enough people to work, the family members who have to take care of them. You have different issues now, because you end up with stress and depression and things like that that put additional burden on other aspects of the healthcare, the health sector. So a country has to think about those things, and they're very happy to pump money to solve the problem. So I take your point about the example, but there's a reason for that. But this one is a corporate one that, anybody know Red?
Yeah.
You're familiar with Red? Who is not? Right?
I don't know, right?
So Red is something called Global Fund. The Global Fund is an
Lisa Keys and.
NGO, right? It's an NGO that partnered with corporates in this way. People who sell things, they would say to them, create a red line. This is me sort of crudely telling you, right? Create a red line. And you'll see, I'll show you an example shortly. And with the red line, when your customers buy from the red line, you give up to 50% of that to the fund. And then we are going to take that money and help with HIV/AIDS in Africa, on that continent. And so companies did it. And then eventually they went into focusing on things like, so like you see, this is GAP, and GAP did this campaign. So you see, they could take the red issue and then you can do whatever you want with it. So this is a sort of a unique partnership where you create this brand that other entities can then slap onto their stuff. You benefit. There's a lot of awareness driven, and then it allows the company like a Gap to do exciting things like this, because they could probably attract Don Cheadle at a cheaper rate because you told Don what it's about. And so you might not get him for free, or you could, because he could just be very interested in the issue and say, yes, I'll participate in your campaign. And so as a company, Gap, you could leverage this celebrity against this initiative that then gets you hundreds of millions of dollars. So they did this campaign, which included Chris Rock and who is this lady? Jennifer Garner,
Yeah.
right? The actor, female actor, and it says, can a jacket change the world? This one can. And then it tells you that it's a red product, it's trademarked. Clothes is designed to help eliminate AIDS in Africa. Right? And so you see the cause right there. And then here's the Apple one. So Apple then did a red line. So you could buy the wearable. That's red. You could buy the red covered iPhone or the iPod at the time, or whatever that one was, and everything in the line. And then Apple did their own campaign. So you saw Gap do their campaign with the different celebrities, really. And Apple's campaign was buy red, give life. Right? And then they were able to do this to showcase all of their partners. And you can see that this piece of collateral now could communicate. Remember, we talked about the campaign being a series of activities. On the media part, if you put this out in the newspaper, then you're kind of saying, you know, if you put this out on behalf of your partners, if you guys decide to take the red concept and do something, right? You recognize your partner's contribution to the effort by just putting out a piece of collateral like that. Could be on your web page, it could be on, you know, social media, or you put it in the newspaper, right? So let's look at the elements of a creative campaign. Anybody know what this one is?
Yeah.
The Whopper, you're familiar with this?
Yeah.
What is it? Tell us.
Food.
Yes, but what's the effort? What is the effort?
It's talking about the freshness of it.
No, even.
Well, I had to tell by the coffee.
Anybody online can say, what does the copy say? The beauty of no artificial preservatives, right? But what did they do? So that's one way to do. They did a stunt.
So showing you
They froze it.
healthy versus.
Okay.
It looks like it's
The healthy versus.
Wow.
Unhealthy version of it. They left it out for a period of time?
Yeah,
Okay.
This is what they, I can't see this thing.
Yeah, I can't really see the top, but it looks like there's.
Covered. I think it's
So
day
they're showing that it can spoil because it's natural,
34, right?
it's organic ingredients.
Right.
Correct. So. Okay, sure, go ahead, person, your comment.
They also, I think, Kalando, to be honest, I think they also made the day one picture look so visually appealing that it looks like, boy, I would eat this.
But
It's so fresh on day one. Like, you know, it gives the impression. I mean, that is the freshest looking lettuce I have seen in a Whopper ever.
Right.
It just looks so fresh and so appealing on day one. Like, you know, it helps to tie into that message that, as someone had mentioned in the room, it is so fresh that it won't last 30 odd days, blah, blah, blah. But the imaging that they used, even the lighting of the image, helps to kind of sell the message that they're sending.
Right, but at the end of the day, Burger King obviously have their brand integrity of their brand to preserve. So yes, the food styling is going to look a particular way to preserve that. But the point they were trying to make is they don't have any artificial stuff in their product. In an era, that's what they're trying to tell us, right? In an era when people are conscious about that, the psychographic profile of the audience is, I'm concerned about whether the food you're giving me is full of preservatives, because we know what that does to the body and how people claim that it impacts Alzheimer's and all kind of stuff. So they were trying to demonstrate that they were listening to their audience, and they did this stunt where they put this burger in a glass case, made the burger fresh on day one, took the photo, left it there. And what they're saying is it should spoil after 34 days if it's real food. And that was the point. So they did that stunt.
I remember when Domino's did that as well, because there was always this narrative, and I personally believe that Pizza Hut is better than Domino's, because Pizza Hut, you can actually see and taste the food, the pineapple, the chicken, the whatever, but Domino's is almost, sorry guys, if you're a Domino's fan.
Yeah.
But it felt like it was shredded things on the pizza, and I used to say it all the time, but I didn't know it was like a big thing until Domino's came up with a new campaign, new ads that say
It's real.
it's real, you know?
Okay. So there's some of the elements, and there's a nice picture here. So your unique value proposition, what sets your cause apart is the thing that I know I use a food thing right there. How do you tug at the heartstrings to spark curiosity? You can spark curiosity by talking about your rich uncle, so not necessarily only heartstring, but is there an emotional thing that you can do? And what is your clear and compelling call to action? I have some examples here that I'm going to share with you guys now. If I could just get this thing to work. So let's say, to identify your value proposition, a specific measurable outcome that can distinguish your organization. I'm using Food for the Poor. So Food for the Poor could say, we deliver 95% of our donations directly to those in need, reaching communities no one else does. So that's how they could explain. I'm not saying that's what they do, but this is one way. I think I have another example. Girl Guides, there you are. Yeah. We empower girls to become tomorrow's leaders through hands-on training, and global connections. I don't know if that's what you do, but that's one way. Let's look at Sandals Corporate Foundation. I don't have Sandals here, but a corporate foundation could say, we use our business acumen to drive community transformation in ways only a corporate entity can. So corporate entities tend to have highly skilled, highly trained professionals who can leverage their time and expertise in different ways. A whole accounts department of Sandals, whether the foundation or SRI itself, could determine that they're going to volunteer and work with community businesses to help them to properly bookkeep. These are experts who are looking at multi-billion-dollar things globally, right? And they can take their time and invest to mentor and work with these small businesses, small shops, garages, community restaurant, whatever it is, club in the community, and they can work with the organizer, the accounting officers of these companies, and say, over the next 3 years, we're gonna work with you to help you to run good businesses. Only a corporate entity that can afford those people, who then have that profile to say, we will give, can actually deliver this, because most of us in this entity probably couldn't afford to get 3 super, very expensive, highly trained accountants to come help. But it's a way that a corporate entity could help. All right, you can leverage your history and legacy, emphasize the longevity and proven success of your organization. So Food for the Poor could talk about 40 years of doing this. Girl Guides could talk about 100 years of doing it, right? And a corporate entity could probably talk about a decade of creating.
40 years.
Or 40 years, or 15 years. 15 years in your foundation, right? You could talk about 40 years. Sandals is 40. And the foundation is 15, right? So
Yes.
you could talk about 15 years partnering with community for sustainable change.
Yes.
Your education. All right, let's see if it, all right, what else? You could show some unmet need and illustrate how your cause addresses those critical gaps. I think, right? So Food for the Poor, for every $1 feeds 3 children who would otherwise go hungry. I don't know if those numbers are real, so this is not a quotable situation. This is an example. Right?
Always feel fake when you say it.
Except, you know what? When we worked on the COVID relief fund, it's real. When we worked on the COVID relief fund, Trishana, I remember we were properly taken on the PSOJ at the time. When we said $50 could feed a family for 2 weeks, 50 US. And the person totally traced off the organization, but I know what was going on. Psychologically, people felt embarrassed to know that $50 could feed a family for 2 weeks. But the challenge was the way we actually got PwC to volunteer their time, to do the analysis. And we bought all the things at cost, and a lot of the organizations gave really, really low prices or donated items. And when PwC did the modeling to access the stuff based on what we were buying it for and what the organizations were giving it for, it worked out to $50, $25 a week, US.
And it actually has an impact on the psychology of the persons who donate. So for the Sandals Foundation, or market or donors are in the United States primarily. When we can break it down and say,
This small amount
can
make this big impact, right?
$10, you can donate $30 and it provides a mammogram to a lady. It connects and say, okay, $30 is not a lot of money.
Well,
I just take one.
Yeah, I can take my $50, but I'm just telling you, people are very, 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 I think, like, as I said, I think people are just not happy to know that things are so here, like that
It's
$50 can, yes, it's jarring, and I think that's what really riled them more than the reality that, but even though you might think it's bad, this person can still eat for 2 weeks. Are you not happy about that? Let's focus here, you know? So yeah, Girl Guides, in a world where girls' voices are still underrepresented, we provide a platform for empowerment. You can see how if you're a female who somebody is saying, come join Girl Guides, and you say, boy, you want to empower young ladies. If you are empowered in where you are, you usually want to share that. If you're a good enough human being with enough conscientiousness, yeah, you just say, oh yes, I would want to empower young boys, young girls, if if you're a man and the people invite you to come mentor some young boys and you know you benefited from mentoring or you're in a position to give back, you're gonna say yes. So you put a message that says, this is what we are doing. All right, let me see the corporate. Filling the gap between government support and grassroots needs. Now, corporates would know that.
That's impactful.
Right, you know you need an economy with workers that are going to impact your business, but you also know the government can't fund it all. So you can find a little space in between and spend your money and have better control. And you create the environment for your business to operate, for your staff to feel good, and your business can continue because you have a good environment around you, right? Otherwise, it's more expensive to run a business if everything around you is backed down and you can't find workers, because when you have to bring in all kind of expats to come run your organization, your staff acquisition costs down through the roof. It's harder to do business. So you want an economy and a society where you can access workers of good quality. So you invest.
And if I may, Kalando, just to also
Go on.
emphasize that the campaign messaging should also have a line, like what you're saying should follow through in everything that you're doing.
Yes.
So say for instance, in the slide before it was, filling the gaps, a corporate foundation fills the gaps between government and the workforce and the community. In everything that we do as a foundation, if it's skills training related, certification related, anything, the narrative that we're punching in speeches, in press releases, in
Interviews,
in
it's that.
interviews,
In your social media
that,
posts,
you
it's
gotta
that.
say that.
It's that,
So
it's that,
it connects
because that's what you want
everything.
people to understand, absolutely. And so you find that even with messaging, guys, and you have a campaign, and the campaign could have a hook or a tagline, but remember that underneath that is a whole bunch of stuff that you're telling people. And to Patrice's point, you need to be able to hear that message at different touch points. So if you see a press release, we're doing this because we understand the needs, and you speak about the needs, and there's a whole bunch more stuff. Right? Let's look at the hooks. Why does it matter to the audience? Is one of the questions you ask. Why does it matter? Why should they care about this issue? Shoshana, why are they going to care about lupus and lupus knowledge, right? You figure out. Because the truth is, every male in this room sees an ad for sanitary napkins. Clearly, they're not targeting you, but you don't use that, right? But to your point about even secondary audience, because you mentioned something earlier, as a father of a daughter, you might be concerned to the extent that she might say, the mother might ask you to go pick up one, or your wife or girlfriend, whatever it is, could ask you to go pick up one because you're going to the supermarket and she's out or whatever. So the extent to which you might pay attention to that might be because you have women in your life for whom that is an important part of their existence. And even then, so you're exposed to the message, although the message isn't targeting you. And that awareness, which is why I wanted to go back to the point where we were saying, you're putting things out to the public, you are aware that when you put things out, even though, especially when you do mass, even though your specific target audience is getting it, other people are getting the message as well. But if everybody is watching TV or you go to the movies and all the ads come on, even if it's not for you, you still see it. So I wanted to be right. I wanted to make the point that when you talk about general public, the truth is each thing when you look deeply into it, you can find who it specifically matters to primarily. But you do have secondary audiences and you do have tertiary audiences when you think about audience and reach. And as a consequence, you don't have to worry about that. But what you need to do, where you need the action taken, make sure that your message gets to your primary target audience, right? everybody in Jamaica is going to be impacted by a hurricane coming. But in truth, the hurricane is gonna come, people who are low lying are probably going to be, or depending on where they say the direction is gonna come, you're probably going to be more impacted than somebody in another space, right? And therefore, we might even think that, you know, that's why sometimes the ODFM and those things will say people who are in these areas, based on what the reports are saying where the hurricane is likely to hit, that's because they're saying primarily you are going to be affected, but all of us are affected by it, some differently. When the last hurricane came, I had a thing there, what do you call that thing where you plug stuff in it? Yes, but the other one that actually. Surge protector, but the thing holds some power in it.
The battery, like a.
This is it.
It can charge stuff.
Yes, not just a, well, it's a big one. So,
but it's a portable one.
no man, it's probably the
Generator?
It's a power.
It's a power.
yeah, but it's the same sort of it's not just the surge protector that allows the, you know, to hit the thing first. It holds some, so it's a power bank, but it's a big enough one. But my wife has it because she worked remotely half the month. So and she runs a team. So of course the organization provides that so that and that allowed us an extra 3 hours of power. When everybody was gone, so we could watch Netflix. Right? I wasn't affected in the same way as the folks, So I'm saying, people, because it's going to affect it differently. Obviously, the people in St. Elizabeth had a massive devastation, whereas me in my place could have watched Netflix and take 2 little pictures and go to my friend. You know? So that's why I'm saying, if you don't talk about the general public, what societal values does your cause align with? Is it about fairness, justice, pride, empowerment? And then we say humanize the story. Frame the issue with relatable, personal stories that illustrate the impact of your work. For example, Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, they could say something like, meet Sharon, a young mother whose life changed because of the access to HIV treatment. And suddenly, if you're interested in that, you're paying attention. And what they've done is humanize it, because now you know a person's name. You may even see a picture of this person, because we are at that stage in our society where people who might have HIV are okay revealing themselves and know where we're coming from. We just talked about it, at least 30, 40 years of development in that area.
That makes sense.
Some people are still concerned. Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah, the stigma is still a major challenge.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. Tap into pride and hope. Create messaging that links their support to the pride of being part of the progress. For example, JAMP, Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal. Everybody know JAMP? Yeah. JAMP is an entity that is tracking the commitments of parliamentarians and so on, what they're supposed to be doing, the things that happen in parliament, the pronouncements from government, expenditure, everything. They track that. And you can go onto the portal and see who said what, when, and what it is supposed to be, and how much targets missed, and so on. So they could talk about the fact that Jamaica can lead the way in public transparency. Your support keeps leaders accountable. So however they're trying to engage you, they're saying, many of us complain about the things that the politicians are not doing. This is one way you could get involved. Go online, be very mindful of the things that say they're supposed to do, and when they don't do it, you write. You agitate as well to say, oh, and use it to consider whether you're going to vote or whatever. So there are ways for you to get involved. Evoke actionable emotions. Instead of just evoking sympathy, you can inspire anger, pride or hope, or emotions that spur action. Okay, children first, that's you. Let's break the cycle of poverty and hopelessness. Together we can rewrite their future. This is probably very terrible for you, but you understand the point I'm making, right? So just some examples. All right, so let's try calls to action. This is Jamaica Agricultural Society. They could say something like, buy Jamaican, empower farmers and feed the community. Now you could zero in on farmers if you're very big into understanding the whole food security issue and the fact that we're getting a lot of processed things coming into our country and we need to be buying food that's grown right here because it's better for us. or it could be your support plan, seed of hope for generations. This one is a little corny, but you can understand how it would work. Yours could be every child deserves a chance. Help us make it real. Or sponsor a child's journey from risk to resilience. A bit more on the development speak, yes. But you can see, you could break down what resilience looks like and risk, because I learned that recently about you know, the fact that when you increase resiliency of citizens, again through my project style work, you reduce their risk. You simultaneously reduce risk and create resilience. Even like the example I gave you with employment. If you have somebody employed and you find ways to keep that employment, you reduce the risk of them getting involved in you know, the risk of them becoming victims of violence or perpetrators, the risk of them falling further into poverty, and you increase their resilience to the temptations they're in within the space. You know, so those are some important factors in how your work could come together to make it support for life. We talk about ending stigma. You guys just talk about the stigma is still fairly high. And that could be a donation call, because you know, this is what we're going to do with the money. Your voice matters, join the movement for health and equality. JAM could say, hold leaders accountable, sign up for updates. Your watchful eye strengthens democracy, join us today. So just some ideas about how we can get that, right? Okay. I think we said it already, the campaign theme is on consistency across visual, tone, and platform. Save the earth one step at a time. If you're into that environmental thing, one step at a time could obviously suggest some kind of walking or running initiative, as you know, walk instead of take the vehicle. You know, so if you live in Europe, where you can walk everywhere, or maybe some parts of America where you can walk, it might be walk instead of drive to cut down on the emissions, right? Right? This is the Save the Earth thing, reduce, reuse, recycle. We've seen a lot of these messages. Building a campaign theme. Oh, I think that's slide got with utility. All right. So how you spark some creativity? I think we end up doing a nice little brainstorming session earlier when Trishana talked about the rich uncle, and then this gentleman here talk about rich uncle Friday. You can brainstorm. It's funny. I mean, it's you're looking at cheaper tools, right? Brainstorming. If you have a friend who you know is a very creative person, always comes up with ideas, you can call up that person and say, "Hey, I have an idea for something. What do you think?" You know, or even like you're in this room now with other people who you know that are exposed to sort of thing. You guys could host a brainstorming session together to come up with some campaign ideas based on what we've covered. You got your free tools. Who Yvonne? Kavina can tell you a little bit about Canva if you don't use it. Everybody in this room probably exposed to Canva, but I know she would rely on that quite a bit. You know Crello?
Yes.
All right, tell us a little bit more about Crello.
So it's similar to how Canva operates in the sense that it will provide you with like templates and design. The only thing is that it's more on the money side. Yes, thank you. On the money side. So it's a bit more expensive, but it operates in the same way that Canva does. It provides you with like designs and stuff. So for instance, one of the things that it does is that if say we're looking to create a campaign about breast cancer, for example, like if you go in and you search, it will provide you with like a list of templates that you can use. And then also, well, one of the things that they've now integrated in it that they are utilizing the AI component. So you can modify and edit the campaigns as it is that you want. But again, for the most part, Canva works better because it's free. It has a free component, but Krilla is not. You have to pay for the resources.
Right. Okay, cool. And then we look at inspiration sources, Pinterest. Most people know Pinterest. And I think the last time I spoke to you guys about that, I think the piece of data I forgot to share is that search in Jamaica, I think it's increasingly, I think it's either 20 or 8% of 20-something% of all search in Jamaica is Pinterest. So even locally, you're finding it gave me a number. I could be wrong on the number, but it was enough for them to point out that Pinterest is being used. And again, it's an inspiration tool because I talked about you guys using Pinterest to actually post your stuff about your cause as because people go there to search for things, and if you want to add your voice to that, you create your own set of content and put it there as inspiration. Sometimes the discovery can work out to grow your coalition, maybe you can get some donation, whatever. So consider that, but also it's an inspiration space. And anybody know Behance?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Behance is a space that lots of creatives post their work there, and you can go and see lots of creative ideas. Everybody know WeTransfer.
Right.
My most favorite brand in the world. WeTransfer. WeTransfer has something called WePresent. That's a great space for lots of creative ideas as well. WeTransfer is a B Corp. It's they exist to develop the creative community.
That belongs to Adobe.
Behance?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. So WePresent is a space where filmmakers, photographers, writers, other artists, painters, creatives go WeTransfer, use their WePresent platform to highlight the work. It's a great space for inspiration and some interesting short films. I remember reading an article on WePresent about the history of chairs and the development and the design of chairs and how the designs of chairs have changed over the years. It's an amazing thing. And even like upcoming film producers and filmmakers, they showcase the work. It's really quite great. Good space to just inspire you to think creatively about how you could make something happen.
Hi,
All right.
I'm sorry, there's a comment online.
Yes, let's hear it.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that I think it's no longer called Krello because we mentioned that earlier in terms of platforms that people can use to create certain media. I think it's now called Vista Create and not Krello. I hope you're hearing me clearly.
Yeah, we heard you. Okay, yes. Vista Create. I guess it was acquired.
Right.
Thank you for that. Okay, so people remember stories, not statistics, right? We can all agree to that. So when you talk about storytelling as a means of creating your message, you're really driving that emotional connection, and that always wins. We talked about these visual tools. These are video tools. Now, a lot of these video tools function in a very similar way to Canva, in that you have these preset things that you can make small modifications, but it's cheaper to do that. I know it's also time consuming, isn't it?
Yes,
Takes a lot of time, so you have to.
requires some level of expertise in video editing.
Right, and so, but the good thing about that is you can probably find some low cost or free video editing tutorials online to equip you to then go use these platforms to do it. Barring that, if you can find budget, just get one video person. That's very good. Save you the time, you focus on your work and you do it, right? But we have to expose you to the different things. Writing tools, Grammarly, really help to sharpen your writing, remind you of some of the grammar. It catches the errors. Sometimes introduce some things that you don't want. So it does still require you to have some skill and mastery. Otherwise, it will lead you wide beyond where you want to go, right?
True.
The Hemingway editor, that one's a little bit more academic, but it depends. I know, guys, you get involved in things such as policy papers and so on. So sometimes you do need a bit of that academic style. But the Hemingway editor is actually quite good because you could ask it to do things like rewrite this for a 6-year-old, and then it will totally break down the content. So you could you could know that this is your huge policy position, which is very esoteric in its being, but you could say to the writer, bring this down to teenagers. So if you go into schools to deal with the young men and women, from that same policy position, you have more relatable language. So you can see how you could make your stuff very consistent all the way down through all the stakeholders. Because it's the same concepts that are going to be delivered in different words. So
And
these
you
are
also have one called Quillbot.
Quillbot, I'm not familiar. Okay, cool, I should check that one out.
Paraphrase is
Quillbot, paraphrase, certainly you have ChatGPT, Midjourney, Meta.
Line, there's CapCut. There's a comment from Rachel saying CapCut and Adobe Spark are good options as well.
Yes, and then also Kimberly said, recommend that you engage YouTube University to learn about accessible features on the apps and can help you make your content more accessible for persons with disability. Right, okay, thanks for that, Kimberly. Talking about people with disability, and there are lots of ways to make that happen. Now, here's the thing with these AI, especially the ones that ChatGPT and Claude is another similar to ChatGPT. I know that Google, they have moved their AI up to responding to your searches more so than the normal Google. So when you go to Google, you see there's this called Gemini. Somebody's one is called Gemini, right? So when you search now in Google, the AI responds to you before the normal Google search. So everybody is integrating it. The issue with for example, using ChatGPT is you have to become a very good prompt writer because you would get back rubbish, or just some basic things, right? And of course, most people are using the free version. But I would also suggest to use Kimberly's term, go to YouTube University to figure out how to write good prompts. Because if you think just tell me something about this, whatever, you just do like a basic thing, you're gonna get some sort of banal information. But if you spend the time to write a proper prompt, and if you learn the different tricks of prompt writing to get, and the truth is sometimes if you use the AI to write some content or to help you with a document, sometimes what I do is I write the thing myself first.
Yeah, I find that to be effective as well. And then I like add a prompt to say improve or rewrite in a particular way for this audience.
Right. I rarely ask it to rewrite for me because I know it's going to give me American English, which I'm not interested in using or being associated with. So I would ask it. Yes, it gives you American English. It's American product.
I guess because I'm not writing in that capacity.
Okay.
Maybe that's why I don't have that challenge.
Yes, you can give it the instruction about what language you want to use, and then you can, sometimes even after it writes for me, and I say, oh no, I need to work on this paragraph, and I go in and I say, fix this and change this and give me some history on this and find some. So I really engage depending on the work that I'm doing. But I found that the more I study and improve my prompting, is the better, faster results, better quality results. But it has a little disclaimer now. It says ChatGPT makes mistakes. Please check.
Yeah.
So people who just think, oh, ChatGPT tell me this, just run on. No,
I've never tried doing math on it.
Math, no.
Oh yeah, that's where the disclaimer comes in.
No, I've never.
That's where the disclaimer comes in.
All right, so picking the right medium. Again, this goes back to understanding your audience and where your audience spends most of the time. Match your medium with your audience demographics. As I mentioned demographic here, but it goes back to the other three I mentioned: demographic, psychographic, behavioral, and geographics. And obviously, even especially with the digital media, you can always target specifically where in the country you want your message to go. So that helps, which is why you should also have an understanding of the geographic profile of your audience. Because obviously, well, now that I see Morant Bay getting a bit of the JUTC transportation situation, you're thinking about people moving around, eh? what is more likely to be the situation in a rural area? Is it that people are still in 2024 walking long distances? They now started out.
Bus routes, yeah.
Yes.
No.
No, remember I said JUTC are Kingston.
No, it's KC and.
Remember
St. Catherine's.
JUTC, yes, so it's Kingston and St. Catherine. Not the other parishes, so now them saying they're St. Thomas. But clearly the JP government decided that St. Thomas is the new city, right? But everything I deal with. So you think about if your campaign has anything to do with moving people to a particular location, and you're thinking geographically as part of your profile, you have to understand, are people walking long distances? Can they get a quick bus? Is the bus route, you understand? Is it mostly that they drive? What's going on? So you have to know your audience very well. You know, this thing is. So you know, social media, which you can use for broad reach and engagement potential, email marketing, like I say, more and more. What is happening when people are, when the media channels are so diverse, and you have to make sure that you're on there and somewhere else, many people are turning to the more personalized. They need to make sure your audience is getting the message, right? So even though it says email marketing, you do have things like SMS or WhatsApp marketing now. I think SMS is probably very good for if you're targeting audiences in America and rural.
Spaces
and
where we
rural.
don't have like internet.
Right, you don't have the internet, but just that I do know that on some platform like Digicel, people who have the fatigue that Digicel sends a lot of messages.
Yes.
And so they might not want it may not be a very good, but surely with regard to WhatsApp, we know that the WhatsApp groups and that becomes a very direct message to you personally. You could personalize messages to groups and so on. So you mix. And we talk about traditional media, which includes not just mass media in terms of like a TVJ, CVM, but also community channels. So there are, like I know in St. James, there's I think it's called More FM. It's a local radio
And
station.
there's one in Portland as well.
Yeah, you have quite a number of them.
I don't remember it.
And people, there are some communities
And
that,
the influencers within these spaces.
right,
Can be your media.
that can be a little tricky, but yes.
Yeah.
Depending on who it is, you know, I usually, yes, you can, because you do find that there are people who support your cause, but you know, influencer can be expensive to engage because a lot of them, that is what they do for a living, and so they have their bills to pay as well. So if you engage with them, they're gonna talk money, and you may not always have enough money, but you could find.
Sorry.
Go on.
I was saying also with the influencers, they have a larger platform, not necessarily platform, scope of activities that they do. That's not necessarily focused on what.
On your, right, which is where I'm going when I'm saying it's a little tricky, because you have to make sure that the values align. And sometimes if you don't have money to buy the value alignment, then you kind of put yourself at risk to, today they are totally with your thing, and then tomorrow somebody upset them and then turn on live and a string of bad word and whatever, and then all of a sudden.
But the traditional influencer within the community.
Oh, yes, I mean your.
You're trusted within that space that, you know, go to Master if they want to hear anything about.
Such and such, yes, okay, I got you. So that type of influencer, not necessarily a social media influencer, but like community influencers on community channels. That can be meaningful and powerful messages. But the messenger is very important to the.
And depending on the communities too, like churches, for instance,
Right.
it's a very effective tool.
Correct. And then you have the integrated approach. You can combine media for maximum impact. So you may use, for example, social media to drive some traffic to your website. Or you could use some text messaging thing or WhatsApp to then push people to follow you online or take part in some kind of social media based initiative. Similarly, you could use a normal regular radio activity to then create drive people elsewhere. The other part of it, like I said, is the campaign is gonna have many different components. So you have your media as far as media for distribution. But then you could also have things like installation, you could have your apparel, depending on what you really need, because if your activities, your set of activities, let's say part of what you're doing an activity on a day that's observed, whether it is World Disability Day or the day to observe the elimination of violence against women, that's the November 25. So let's say you're actually going to host something on the day, then apparel could make sense for part of your branding. Some kind of installation could make sense because you're actually pulling people to a space to get something done as part of your overall campaign.
So we are at the end of the session.
All right, I hope it was useful.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmoth, as always.
Yeah.
I was very much in the session. If I was not, I became in person. So online. So it was indeed a good wrap. Thank you.
So just to acknowledge, there were a lot of voter thanks shared on the platform as well.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely, lovely.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming
Thank you.
and have a help you to think about some campaign activities you want to do, or you get excited to sell some cookies like our girl guys partner there.